The City Council Committee on Government Services, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, met remotely via Zoom on Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022 at 6:00 p.m. for the purpose of discussing the matters listed below. Notice of this meeting was posted on January 31st, 2022 at 12:18 p.m. I have a full agenda here. Hang on. Let me pull up the full preamble here. I don't think I have that.
Yeah, I don't think I sent that.
Just a second.
Mhm.
Notice is hereby given that the City Council Committee on Government Services, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, will hold a committee meeting on Wednesday, February 22nd, 2022 at 6:00 p.m. by remote participation in accordance with Chapter 20 of Acts 2021 for the purposes of taking action on the matters listed below. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time by technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, matters not requiring a public hearing, we will post on the City of Salem's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive recording of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Individuals may participate remotely in the meetings via a remote participation platform called Zoom. Members of the public and/or parties with a right to and/or requirements to attend this meeting may access the remote participation meeting through any one of the following ways. Please click on the following link below. To join the meeting, password 890570. Go to the meeting website link at the website. By telephone, participants can dial a toll-free phone number at 888-475-4499 or 877-853-5257 to join the meeting. When prompted, enter webinar ID and follow the instructions to join the meeting. So today we are meeting to discuss with the Human Rights Director to discuss the comparative salaries of the city clerk for the upcoming budget season. In attendance is the full committee, along with Councilors Merkel, Council President Morsillo, Councilor Riccardi, and we also have with us Lisa Camerata, the HR Director, and Eileen Simons, the City Clerk. So we're going to have just a look at some of the comparative salaries that Lisa has put together for area city clerks, and then I guess we'll leave it up to the committee. But my goal, if you ask me personally, coming out of this meeting, is to come out with some sort of a salary for the city clerk going into FY23, to somehow memorialize why we're giving that salary, just so we have something on record that we can look back on and say this is why. If there is an increase, this is why this increase was given. And then if we have time, potentially, I would love to take a look at just some very, very high level goals for the next year. So if you look at the city ordinance, which I sent out this morning or this afternoon, it does give the council the authority to set goals for the city clerk. And I think there's, the challenge that we run into for sure here is that we have, I think the only full-time employee in the city that does not report to the mayor. Very clearly in the ordinances, we should be setting her salary. But we're also 11 part-time employees that change out constantly. So I think there has never been a very orderly way that these salaries have been set. So my goal is to try to just create some semblance of a process here that is clear and concise, and something that we can look back on next year and say, this is how we've done it in the past, and this is how we're going to do it going forward. So I guess I'll turn it over to Lisa. And Lisa, if you can give an overview of just, I think for me, it's been a learning process, just because like most of the folks on the council, I work in the private sector. I don't see the pay process inside of a city government, which is different. If you can go over just the way this happens in the city typically, the way it's happened for the city clerk, and then maybe we could, if you're able to screen share, we could take a look at some of those comparative salaries. If you're not able to screen share, I think we all have it right now, so we all could take a look at it. And if anyone doesn't have it, I can send it out to them. I think just Councilors Riccardi and Merkel and Morsillo may not have it right now. So I'll turn it over to you, Lisa. And you're on mute.
There I am. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you all. And Happy New Year, right? This is my first meeting with all of you, so it's nice to be here. So typically, since I've been here, I think some of you may have heard me mention this because I know, when did we meet? Last in December, right? So I'm not sure how many of you were present, but I'll just give a little bit of a history from my perspective. Since I've been here, it'll be 15 years in March. Typically what we have done is put together a salary survey, which involves contacting other municipalities to find out what their ranges are for positions that we have, right? So we will give them a list of all of our positions, from assistant assessor to chief assessor to engineer, DPW director, assistant engineer, HR director, and all of our positions. And we ask them to tell us what the if they have a salary range, which I'll talk about in a minute, whether they have a minimum salary, a maximum salary, how many hours a week they work, what the actual salary is, if they have that, if they have that information. Some municipalities actually have a very wide range. I think if you look at one of our city government books, the city of Salem has ranges that have not been updated since the year 2000. I'm not going to hide that fact. It's there. If you look in the city government book, you're going to see it, right? So it's there. So since I've been here, we have done a salary survey and sort of established ranges. And what we do is we would get those ranges. So let's say, for example, I called the city of Peabody and they said their engineer made between 80,000 to 115,000. And so that year, let's say we were looking at the salaries and our engineer was at $76,000. So we're looking at, say, Peabody, and then say all the other communities have ranges in that ballpark. We would say, wait a minute, our engineer is grossly underpaid, right? He's at $76,000. Peabody is between 80 and 115. Danvers might be 90 to 120. And I mean, we have all of these different municipalities that I have a massive spreadsheet for that I can also share with you. What I'm getting at is that's how we sort of look at a range. And so if somebody is, below that, then what happens at budget season is we meet with the mayor, myself, the finance director, the city solicitor at times, because she's, got all the institutional knowledge for salaries and how they were handled in the past. And so we just look at it, and we typically will go sort of one by one, like, this person is grossly outside of the range, and that person, let's say we find the average for an engineer is 80 to 115, as I mentioned before. Well, there's just no way a budget can sustain going from 76,000 to 115, right? So you would at least try to say, let's try to get this person somewhere maybe in the mid 80s, closer to, towards a higher end of that, because that position, just based on comparable communities. And, we use municipalities with, similar populations, higher populations, which is why you establish a range. So you've got some highs and lows, and somewhere in the middle there, you try to get to a range. It's not a perfect science, yet I can tell you it's pretty much what the municipal world is doing. This is pretty much what all of my colleagues are doing in other municipalities, and you look at a range. And so, like I said, just going back to the engineer, if our engineer was at $76,000 a year, and the range showed it was 80 to 115, we would make a decision that salary needed to be increased for a multitude of reasons, right? The job is demanding. We don't want to lose this person to go to another municipality to make that 90 to 115,000 or even 80,000. Do you know what I mean? So those are sort of all the pieces that come into a conversation. And then we'll also talk about, if say this is so much the engineer, but let's say it's maybe an assistant position. We might talk to the department head, how is that person working out? And, it becomes personal to find out what a person is doing at times. But I do want to stress that a lot of times we really are just looking at positions. One caveat with this that can be a little bit frustrating is, I think I mentioned this in December, is, an engineer in Danvers may not do what the engineer in Beverly does, and that engineer may not do what the engineer does in, say, Salem or, Methuen. So it isn't an exact science, and we're aware of that, which is why I think we do tend to rely a little bit more heavily on the fact that there is a range and something we can at least be comfortable with. I know I talk to my colleagues just for my own position. And, we'll have conversations. Well, do you do that? Well, I don't do that, but I do this. Or, I do the 1095s, but the other department does this. So I can't say that every job description is the same in every municipality, but I think as times change and technology changes, yeah, I mean, we're all doing a little more just based on state and federal mandates. There are some things we don't do anymore. And at the end of the day, we do rely on job titles. And like I said, we really try to be mindful when we're doing the budget and what a budget can sustain and, what we're able to afford. So that's sort of the history on what we've done. Department heads do have conversations with their employees. They do talk about certain projects they want to have happen during the year. So there are conversations about performances. We don't have implemented a very strict performance appraisal process. We are working towards that. But I mean, there are conversations. I mean, and department heads have staff meetings to discuss what they want to do, where they're headed. And I know I do it with my own group. I know the engineer does it. The Department of Public Services has meetings every morning just to talk about the basic work. And that's how you sort of find out who's doing what, who may be doing more. And, although that's a union environment in some places, it does give a department head an opportunity to sort of see where somebody is doing more and perhaps may warrant, a higher increase, that sort of thing. So what I did today was, first of all, anybody have any questions about that process so far? Okay. All right. Well, that was easy. But it's not an easy process, right? Because you are dealing with people and their livelihoods and their jobs, right? And so, we really do try to be mindful of, I think I mentioned this back in December as well. I keep these spreadsheets from year to year. And if I see that something went down, I'll say, wait a minute, I'll actually call the community and say, wait a minute, last year, like that salary was 92, now it's 77. And they may say to me, we had a reclassification and we split the job duties up. And then that's how we find out that maybe a job description or a job title has changed. So what I have for you tonight is I had put something together back in December that had been updated from October, that I think had been updated from May. So what I have tonight is information that's accurate as of today, with actual salaries and stipends that apply specifically to the city clerk. And so I did email it to all of you. I know that the city clerk had provided something back in December. That's what I have. I don't know if you have something more recent from her. I have the one from December. So what I did was, do you want me to, I could screen share it. Let me try doing that.
Yep, that would be great.
Oh. Can you see it?
Yep, there it is.
Oh, okay. I have like okay, I'm gonna move all of you over because that's better. So yeah, so what I have is, it's today's date, February, which is I have here because we did it today. So these are the ranges, right? And so as I was telling you earlier, we have, we do the municipality across the top, the population as accurate as we could get it. And then like I'll start with here, right, with Chelsea. So we actually verified this as well today because this is the salary. So if a municipality doesn't give us a minimum and a maximum, I think actually I'm going to move over to another one just so I can explain it a little bit better. Danvers. So right here, Danvers has a range, right? Danvers's minimum annual is 78,000 with a maximum of 105.24. And that information I got in December. Today we called and found out that the city clerk or the town clerk in Danvers actually makes 92,500. There are no stipends, so the actual total is 92,500. And I just, on a personal note, was comfortable with that because, and it made sense to me because they have a range that I learned about back in December of 78,669 and 105,024, and this person is right in that range. So that's just sort of how this spreadsheet works today. And so if you want to just go, municipality by municipality, that's what I've done. And so down here is the most current information with actual salaries. Gloucester, we did not hear back from. I went with the salary we had before. And Medford, I went with the salary we had before. which was from May of 21. I wasn't able to get updated information in October, when we first met about this, December or today. So I'm just going with that for right now. That's sort of an overview. Before I go any further, does anybody have any questions about this piece?
Councillor Watson-Felt?
Oh, no,
You're
you're
on
on.
Always. Thank you, Chair Hapworth. Lisa, the one thing one of the things I noticed about this spreadsheet, which I really appreciate, is that it includes the number of supervised employees under the clerk. Do you happen to also have a data point on which of these roles also oversees the full election process, or if that number of supervised employees includes the election staff?
So I don't have a breakout as far as that goes. I think that the city clerk may have put something together that itemized some of that back in December. This was total staff that falls under the city clerk. So
Okay.
So I don't have a further breakout on that.
Okay. Chair Hapworth, would it be possible to receive any of that information? I'm not sure if I had seen that before.
I believe Eileen sent it out maybe 2 or maybe like 4 hours ago.
Oh, I may have missed it then. My apologies, Eileen.
3 or 4
I'll
hours
take a look
ago.
right now.
She had sent it in December, so it's just what she sent back then has been re-forwarded, and I think all the new councilors should have it as well.
I do have the one from December. I don't know if I don't have an updated one.
Oh, I see it now. I apologize. I was away from my desk this afternoon. Thank you.
And so just getting back to what we had talked about earlier too, when Councilor Hapworth, when I first started, was up here, this whole section here is what we do for every position in the city. Like what I call like the bigger positions, right? Like the appointed positions that come before the council, assistant, I think the assistant city clerk falls under here, our assistant assessors. These are for, and we put this together for all of the positions. And as I said, this will tell us after we put all the municipalities in, over here in this column is the average, right? And so, like I had said earlier, let's say we're talking about the engineer. So if we found out that the average is 97,668 for a minimum and 109 for a maximum, and our engineer was at $82,000, we would say, you know what, we got to do something about this, because A, we're going to lose this person, and B, this person is not, we're not even competitive out there. So even if that person were to leave, we would still have to raise the salary to try to bring somebody in the door, because that person has already left to go earn more money. So the point that we had gotten at last time when we met is that this is what, and again, this is what we were looking at, is that the average for the minimum for the city clerks, based on the salary that I had, salary survey, the minimum was 97,668 and the maximum was 109,435. And the city clerk salary at the time, the base salary is the 99,594, and then with stipends, the total was 106. So that's what we had looked at last time. And so what I did, because for tonight's exercise, is we actually did the base salary. So if we go down here, this is the annual base for all the municipalities. Stipends, if we were that we were made aware of when we called today and over the last few days, and then I have a total in there, right? So the average base salary is 104, so we can see that that is lower, and then the average with stipends is 108,000. So there is a bit of a discrepancy there, and this is based on current information.
Councillor Varela, I think you had a question as well, and then Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth, and thank you, Lisa, for the info. I just wanted to clarify, I do know some info as far as concerning the City of Revere. City Clerk Ashley Melnick does not oversee the elections process or the staff at the City of Revere. So obviously, I just wanted to mention that when it comes to looking at what Eileen does and what our city clerk office does. As you can see, Revere, Ashley's salary is 97,713. And that's without overseeing elections. Just to let you know, Councilor Watson-Felt. Thank you.
Councilor McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Lisa. Thank you, Lisa, for being here tonight. Appreciate the time. I notice that there's a pretty wide discrepancy in some of these individual ranges, and I just wondered if you had any sense of where any of that comes from or how recently some of these ranges were generated, knowing that our own is 20 plus years old.
So I don't think I heard the first. So this information on the ranges up on the top section, I actually have the date that this information was obtained. So like Chelsea is today, Lynn range, I got that back in December. Malden was December. Methuen is December. The actuals were from today.
So I think I should go ahead, Councilor McLean.
Yeah. I understand when you collected the information. I guess I'm asking if you have any sense of when these cities themselves may have established these ranges, or any other sense of why they're so wide. I mean, looking at some of these, there's communities that I would think of as being relatively comparable whose ranges sometimes differ by $20,000-$30,000. So I'm just wondering if you have any sense of where that comes from.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I could speculate. I think some municipalities, what they'll actually do is they will have a consulting firm come in and set really wide ranges, right? They'll actually get information from other municipalities as well. And it's kind of funny because we're always all sharing the same information. But I have seen ranges, you did bring up a good point. They're pretty wide and they do vary. I don't know if it's the mechanism they use internally or if it's through a consulting firm. I really can't really, I really don't have an answer as to how they did or how they arrived at those numbers.
Thank you.
Lisa, just if we could, I know you and I spoke about this a little bit this morning, but is there any sense, I guess, for the other counselors, is there any sense of what the cost of living adjustment will look like, or I guess maybe even just how you all tend to look at that? Because I know that that's a factor that's on people's mind, I'm sure, this year with inflation being where it's at and with just sort of the price of things.
Yeah, so we've been fortunate. I actually was looking at another spreadsheet earlier. We've been fortunate over the last several years that, except for in 2020, I believe that if there wasn't, all non-union employees, there was no cost of living, no merit, no bonus, that nothing went through for 7/1 of 20 in the middle of COVID. But we have been fortunate that the mayor has recommended cost of living. I mean, I like to call it a COLA, but I also like to call it the fact that people's jobs have increased and there is additional work, and based on the survey as well, that there have been increases of at least 2.5% to 3% over the last several years. I think when Mayor Driscoll first got in several years, a while ago, I've been around for 15 years, so it was prior to that, but I believe that she actually, did a pretty extensive, deep dive into what the salaries were and sort of brought people up where they needed to be based on, as I said, ranges. But I believe somewhere around 3.5. I mean, I think that, people saying inflation is like 7%. But I do believe the average, I've done some research on this with other colleagues and some listservs I'm on, as well as an association I belong to. And it's like 3.5, 3.3, that sort of thing is like an average increase for 2022. I mean, I don't know where we're settled on this year with the mayor. I haven't discussed that part with her. We're just getting ready to do our budgets. I know that, we do have some people that are definitely lower, and we're losing employees. I mean, we are, we're losing another employee actually in the next 2 weeks to another municipality she's going to make more money. So we really, we do need to look at these. We're aware of it. It's hard, right? I mean, you start putting in $5,000 and $10,000 on each salary. That's a huge budget buster when we have everything else to be concerned about. So we're trying to be thoughtful and mindful and still be fair and equitable and still recognize the good work that people are doing. I mean, you know, as I said last time too, you know, I mean, this is not a personal thing. I mean, Eileen and I, we're personal friends, but yet we're both in different roles right now. And so, you know, this is the information that we have, and this is what we have.
Any other questions for Lisa? Well, Lisa, thank you for the work you put into this. This is helpful. I think, you know, for sure it's not apples to apples. There's a lot of differences between roles and between the complexity of working in different cities. But I think this at least gives us an understanding of where people are at right now and what other communities are doing. But
No, I do appreciate you saying, you know, it's not an exact science. It's just, it's kind of the tool that we use in the industry. Do you know what I mean? It's, you know, I'll talk to, you know, my colleagues, and, you know, like I said, we're losing someone now because this person is going to make a considerably more money than she's making here. And so we need to look at that, right? For us to stay, as I said, competitive and not lose good people. It's not an exact science, but if we can at least have something to somewhere settle in the middle, I just, you know, it tends to work.
Eileen, would you be willing to just discuss I know that this was something that I had to learn a lot about over the last 2 weeks, is just how your pay increases have happened over the last 3 years, and what you saw while you were the assistant city clerk under Cheryl LaPointe, what you saw in those previous, how many years were you under Cheryl? Was it 15, 13?
Yeah, 14, I think, 14.
During that time period, how you saw the pay raises happen or not happen? What was the process like?
So the process is similar as Lisa just explained. It was always, you know, during the budget year, Cheryl at times may have put in a raise for, she more than once probably for me as an assistant. And then whether the mayor approved it or not, you know, it would be up to the mayor, especially for her. I think Cheryl put in a raise once over the last 14 years that I worked for herself. But it was always basically, you know, whatever the non-union management people received, we received as well. I believe 1 year, and I wish I always say I'm going to look, and I don't. There was 1 year that I did get in April of, I don't know if you remember, Lisa, a 2,500. What's that?
Oh, because we had gone through this exercise. Cheryl went before the city council in 2018. So there was
What year?
So in 2018, well, for fiscal year 2018, when I remember we went in front of the council, for a similar request.
Right, but it was, yeah. I thought it was earlier than that, but you know, there wasn't on the floor again, like we're doing now, an increase for me for 2,500 and an increase for her that I think an order, that was one and only time that an order was ever put through from the council to increase the assistant city clerk's salary of 2,500 and the city clerk's salary of, I think it was about $5,000. And that was the only time that's ever happened, but not typically and usually it is, as Lisa explained, what happens in the budget process. We put in for an increase and, you know, we explain the reasons for increase, whether it's salary or expenses, to the mayor during our budget time, and then wait to see what comes out of it.
So yeah, Eileen, you were right. That was actually, it was effective 4/1/11. It was,
Yeah, it was very, yeah.
5.8%, and it was before the start of the fiscal year.
Yeah,
But-
and I remember because in April, then it was a whole year and a half before my next merit increase went through.
Right, and so then consistently after that, it's been, and for all of us,
It's been before and after, it's all been the same process.
2.5, 2.5, 2.5, and like I said, we went 1 year where there wasn't. I mean, I think we could all understand that it was during COVID. I think if we weren't actually obligated to put through anything for any other group, I don't think that would have happened either. And then last year was 3%.
Okay. Well, I guess we've got that information in front of us now. I think there's some we have a good base to build off of, but now I think it's time for probably some discussion around. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, may I just address the council if you don't,
Absolutely.
unless you
Please.
want to ask questions first, that's up to you. Okay, so again, I know I don't want to sound like a broken record, but there are 5 new counselors on board this year. And how this came to be, it wasn't anything about complaining that I was underpaid or anything like that. I wasn't basing off a salary survey at the time in last March of last year when I went through the budget season. It was just coinciding with my 3-year term expiring of June 28th and in the new budget season happening of July 1st. I had put together a summary of accomplishments by year of 2018, 19, and 20, what I had done. And just based on that, I mean, my salary was my salary, and just based on that is what I asked for a raise in terms of my accomplishments. And then I know, and then when we met and I know HR uses the salary survey and that I understand it's a tool. It's not maybe the only tool in the toolbox, but and that's when I, went out to try to work with my colleagues to find out, because I do know, as Councilor Varela said, not every city clerk, and I understand not every job is apples to apples, but in terms of the city clerks, there are some people that do elections, there are some people that do not do elections. There are some councilors that do elections, I mean, city clerks that do elections, and they may not do council. Sometimes council has their own department. So, and that is one of the reasons why I put down a few of the, pretty well-known cities that have election commissions like Revere, to show that the city clerk who does, council, what Ashley Melnick makes at 120, and then Diane Colella, who actually just retired, the election commissioner, made 70,000. And I did the same with Somerville and Medford because I knew of them having a separate election commission. But interestingly enough, in Methuen, I didn't realize they didn't do council. So that's why I kind of broke it down a little bit more than just the min and the max, and try to separate out in terms of what they did and what they didn't do. If they did council, didn't do elections, and stipends, because everybody's stipend is a little bit different. And that's the only reason why I put together my salary survey. Again, I didn't feel as though I was underpaid. I was just asking for an increase based on what I had accomplished with my current salary. And I understand, there are new jobs opening. There was a lot of city clerks and assistant city clerks that left or retired after last year's presidential election. It just, city clerks are usually in their job 30, 40 years. And a lot of them after the last election left. And that's when I also noticed some other cities and towns that aren't on this list, when they were putting out their job descriptions, their salaries have significantly increased when they were looking for a new city clerk. And so, as I said, I have 2 titles of not only just city clerk to the council, but a chief election officer. And as of just last week, that's not going to get any, easier, where they just passed, or the House passed, the new permanent vote by mail bill with early voting for 14 days straight before a November election and 7 days straight before a primary, and that every voter is going to get a form just to sign and send back to get automatically, once they sign it, to get a ballot. So we're almost doing a vote by mail state without having the vote by mail, central tabulation city. So there's going to be things that are going to continue that we can talk about going forward. But I just, until, council and elections in Salem, if they can ever get separated, but until then, it's a lot of time, a lot of not only just weekends, but long nights. You kid about, having a card in your office. But again, the increase was based on the past accomplishments instead of like new accomplishments, because I haven't accomplished them yet. But so I just wanted to give a little background of why I did a salary survey and why I asked for the original raise back in March, that, now almost a year later, in fiscal year 22, now it's fiscal year 23. So that's where we are, and I'd be more than happy to go over any of those accomplishments with any counselors offline if they're interested. Thank you.
Councilor Morcillo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eileen, just a quick question. It sounds to me like you need more help. Has there been discussion about hiring another full-time, part-time combination of people for the office to handle elections?
Well, right now I'm down a half a person in my elections office. He just got another full-time job in City Hall. So first I'm looking for that. I have contemplated that. I mean, I will put it in my budget. That again, that has to be approved by the mayor. And I'm just trying to, hopefully listen if I am looking for an increase in my pay, that I can also ask for a full-time person without feeling like I'm trying to get it from all sides. But I would love more help. I mean, last year I had to hire, like in 2020, I should say, and even last year, but not as many, like 5 full-time almost employees from like August to November during 2020, and a lot more with early voting. My budget was, I mean, a lot of it was covered by COVID and CARES, but a lot of it got blown out of the water with that, and it's not. So I do need more help. I mean, I was interested in asking for a full-time person between elections, and then when it was an election season, they could help with council. And that was my thought going forward for putting my new budget together. But that again would have to be approved by the mayor. I mean, I would love 2 people. We used to have 10 altogether. Right now, we have 7, I think. So years ago we had 10 people in the city clerk's office, and now there's 3, 4, 5, 7.
Yeah, because the thing that you say about your job and how it's expanded with all the new voting laws, like that's even raising your pay to handle all of that stuff won't change the number of hours that you're putting in every week. And so, it's kind of this is a 2-pronged issue here. And if your office needs more bodies to help get through the work, it's not gonna, we're not gonna make elections any easier. It's not gonna go back to one day. So I think definitely your budget needs to be proactive in that area of getting more help.
That was my thought process to at least ask for like making that half-time person full-time, but I can ask, for 2. Again, I don't have any power over what gets approved in my budget, but I do agree, and that's why I agree. By increasing my salary is not going to decrease my hours, but at least it will make it a little bit more, understandable when I'm here those hours and when I'm not, giving back. I mean, not to, I'm just laying it out there, without being very graceful in how I say it. Sorry. But, and I think we all feel that way. I think all non-union management people, department heads feel that way. They all give their time. They're all great. I mean, I don't do my elections alone. I rely on, DPW. I rely on, HR, I rely on finance. I rely on everybody. It's not like I'm doing this job alone, and I'll be the first to admit, and I think I might have mentioned it to Councilor Hepworth. There's many department heads, and one probably on Zoom with me that I don't feel are underpaid or I'm not paid enough. We all put our pound of flesh in there, and I'm no different. I'm just, I report to you, and this is how it ends up. And it's not just in the budget where it can just be put in by the administration. I have to sometimes go through this avenue, and I'm willing to do it.
Well, don't worry about sounding graceful, Eileen. It's you are the only person in the city of Salem that has to have a public meeting to discuss their salary. So it's not a comfortable thing. We just want to make sure that we get it right, and we understand what you're asking for. Councilor McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to ask Eileen, if you would, can you just briefly sort of describe to us who does report to you and kind of what their roles are in supporting the office, and also you are more than welcome to to list the items that you felt were your accomplishments, go ahead and toot your own horn. I have no problem with that.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. So I have two assistants. One is Assistant City Clerk to Council, which is, I don't know if we need names, but originally that job was to help me just strictly with council. And I have another Assistant City Clerk for elections who was supposed to gear more towards election. And that probably happened for maybe one election. In 2018, when I hired them or changed their job titles, they were internal promotions it was September of 18 and we were in a state in November, state election. So they had to stay, and they both worked in elections office. So they had to stay there. In 2019, a local election, it was more manageable where my assistant to election was able to manage that. And then November, a little bit more, we did help, we always help. But then we had a recount and we know the rest from there, which is still continuing. And then in 2020 with all this, it was all hands on deck. It didn't matter what your title was. And we took on, and my assistant to council also took on more work with doing the poll pads every day and updating it and the voters and making sure we get them all checked in. The drop boxes, that's a lot of work. I mean, it's easy for the residents, but we have to go out almost every day and go around with the police officer and collect them and open them and track them. And that became my assistant counsel's job description. And I could go on and on that, those titles now, unfortunately, have become not definitive anymore. So, and in my elections office, so to get back to Council McLean, I have assistant city clerk elections. And right now I have an assistant registrar full-time. So there's two full-time people there. There was one part-time election worker that we had that spoke Spanish. That's one of the requirements. And Lisa has posted that job for me. I haven't been able to touch base with her to see if we had anybody reply. I have 3 people in room 3. I kind of break them down into rooms. You're going to get used to hearing room 5, room 3, room 1. Those are my vital records people mostly. They do death, birth, marriages, business certificates, dog licensing, yard sales, you name it, they do it. I do a little bit of cross training. We are able, especially with one of the new people I have, able to kind of help each other out. But I mean, that office, I don't know if anybody comes in, but there's lines there every day. And between people coming in and ordering online, it doesn't cut down on the amount of work. I mean, so those are those 3. So 2.5 out of room 5, 3 in room 3, and myself and one other in room 1. So that is my breakdown of who reports to me. And if you want to hear a few list of accomplishments, right when I took over in 2018, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I got what we call UniPay online. I was the first department to get not only, I shouldn't say, collectors had, you could pay your taxes online, but I was the first time that we could order vital records, birth, death, and marriages online. And I also was the first department to actually get a swipe in my office to be able to pay by credit card in the office. So that was like one of the first things that I did. And I also tried to increase my council minutes and my agendas by doing more backup, putting more backup there, doing a little bit more detail in my council minutes. So that was something. And the other thing in 2018 that I did that works out really well is that I had a separate computer installed in one of our other windows to allow people to come in to fill out their marriage licenses online. So they didn't have to take up the time in the room in the actual room 3 area. Since then, the newest thing for that kiosk is that I have a marriage software company and now it's all, they can start the process online. They just come in, we look it over, we print it off and they're done. So very excited about that. In 2019, I began with the audio visual companies to address the city council sound in the council chambers. And by September of that year, it was installed and complete. I had our upstairs vault and our downstairs basement retention room redone. That was through CIP money. It holds a lot more records because that's the one thing about city clerks, we're always running out of vault storage space. So I increased it by having a new shelving system put in there. We had a Ward 2 in November 19, the Ward 2 hand count with the write-in race. So we got through that. I got scanned in all my town and city records so people can look them up online. It's never been online before because we're always afraid to let our records leave our office. Our recount and our 9-day trial of going through a 9-day trial. 9 days doesn't seem like a lot, but it seemed to cover like all the holidays and came out, victorious in that end, which led into 2020 of having to set up an inauguration and then like redo inauguration and redo inauguration, sort of like this year. And then, just in 2020, I mean, I basically just say like, plus 20,000 vote by mail ballots. I mean, I'm just going to stop there because that just like took over my whole, our lives. We're in the office more than home. None of us worked remotely. We all had to be hands-on. Our state computer, you cannot work remotely because of safety reasons. And even our vital records, nobody really wanted to work remotely. You had to be there. You have to get records. You have to touch them. You have to feel them. You have to print them out and give them to people. So, obtaining the drop boxes and setting procedures like last minute. And, again, 351 city and town clerks did all this. I mean, not just me, but if you want, you ask. So I can also share that list with you. That's a little bit more. That was just sort of summarized.
Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. I've always felt it a little bit bizarre that 11 part-time people, just like you said, Councillor Hapworth, supervise someone like the city clerk. Having said that, I very much agree with Councillor Masillo that you're not going to get more employees if you don't ask for it, and I hope you do. Prior to my running for councillor the first time in 2017, I worked the polls. And for anyone who's worked the polls, it's really eye-opening because people work the polls maybe one day, maybe a half a day. And yet when you walk into the poll, you realize how competent and well-trained they are. I'm very proud, Eileen, to say I can work with you. I think one of the accomplishments you didn't list that I would put up is how the process of all the things that you and your department have done have existed through COVID because, elections, require people in many cases to interact with people in person. In my professional career, I've had anywhere from 2 to 134 people report to me. And I'm very much unconcerned about, hours and comparisons with other cities. I used to tell people we have 10 pounds of shit in a 2-pound bag, and our job is to make sure that the bag, which has a hole in it, is filled as much as possible. I don't feel like the way you look at your job is determined by how many hours you work. I feel like what I've noticed since I've lived in Salem is that you do the job until the result is done. And I've always felt like we should judge people who work with us based on 2 things, competence and commitment. And it's very unusual to have people who are both highly competent and highly committed. It's almost never happens, where people require minimal supervision. You could just count on people. And so my last thing is, I feel like you exemplify commitment and competence. And even when you're not in the office, when I'm in there talking to Rochelle or Maureen or any of the other people in your staff, Kristen, or Lily, or whoever, I always feel like there's a level of competence and teamwork that is something that we could take to every department in the city. So I just wanted to say that I'm very proud to work with you.
Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth, for letting me speak, especially since I'm not a member of the committee. I also want to thank Eileen for a job really well done, you know, through COVID and the increased workload. It would be a very long meeting to talk about all the extra, you know, hats you've been wearing. And I also want to, you know, support what Council President Marcillo had said, you know, about needing to be proactive. You know, when you look at what you had said, it used to be 10 people in the city clerk's office, and now there's 7, with increased workloads with, you know, early voting and vote by mail and the challenges of COVID. You know, just looking at the math just doesn't add up there. So I want to think about, you know, being, as she had said, the budget need to be proactive. But also you know, employee turnover is costly. It's very costly, and it's challenging for everyone. It's stressful, and I think we want to be, you know, proactive as well in you know, keeping and making, you know, valuable people who are running our municipal government, you know, feel valued, and yeah, and you know, make sure, you know, we do everything we can. So thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments before we open up the discussion a little bit? Councilor Watson-Felt. Muted again.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair Hapworth. One question for Lisa through you, please. Lisa, does Salem have a minimum maximum range in which we try to keep? Is there a cap on this? Your turn. You're muted too.
So we don't, right? I had just mentioned earlier, and I know I sort of gave you a lot of background and history when I started, but we haven't followed those ranges for many, many, many years.
Right.
And so we don't really have, you know, we don't have anything formalized. You know, like we just posted our deputy director of finance position. Like that, this is actually a good example. We initially posted it pretty close to what the person was making when she left, and we didn't get very many applicants. So we bumped it up a little bit, right? So now we're at, you know, we're just sort of looking at what we can afford, what the budget will sustain, and what is sort of out there. And so that went from probably like 75 to 80, and now we're up to offering 97,000 with a sign-on bonus, and it's been vacant for longer than I care to even tell you. And we actually had 2 really good candidates. And, you know, I think Councilor Merkel just said, you know, hiring and employee turnover becomes very costly, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, 3 to 4 hours at an interview, 3 or 4 employees' time, 2 or 3 times you do that, calling references only to hear, well, my current employer is offering me more money to stay. And you can't fault somebody for that. But I'm just sort of giving you a bigger picture. So I appreciate that Councilor Merkel said that, because it has become more costly than I've really ever seen. Because the first thing we say is like, oh my God, we just spent like 40 hours trying to recruit that person with all of our carrots. And, you know, we've got great benefits, and we've got some remote work available, which is something we didn't really ever have before, you know, in light of COVID. And we're looking at sort of extending that to really make it, you know, even a sort of a better draw for people, and with the sign-on bonus and with the salary. You know, 97 is a decent salary for an assistant finance director. So anyway, getting back to that, we don't really have a cap. We just are trying to figure out really what works without sort of, you know, we wouldn't offer like an assistant finance director $150,000 a year. Do you know what I mean? Like we would certainly not bring that person in higher than what the finance director is making. So we've got some, you know, some nothing formalized, but a school of thought around it.
I would add to the conversation, and I, you know, make no bones about showing my hand on this one, but along the same vein of the conversation, I think that when it comes to a city clerk position, there is an incredible amount of institutional knowledge that is of extremely high value. The process is important. It tends to be rather legal, very formal. There's a lot to learn. And I think that when you have a position like a city clerk, we're in an incredibly blessed situation where our city clerk was our assistant city clerk for many, many years. So I think a lot of what we see when we look at the range that Lisa has offered us tonight is a number of years that the person has been in the position. And you can see, and they may have had, prior experience as city clerks like Eileen, but that's not always the case. And I think that to know the ins and outs of our city, our ordinances, our rules, our guidelines, the way that our government form works, and the support of the council, all of that, I just want to make sure that in addition to the pivoting, the increased tax, all that stuff that we've all said, I take into account the years of particular experience and the institutional knowledge that would be incredibly difficult to replace. So I'm just throwing that into the floor too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Watson-Felt. So we're coming up on 1 hour right now. I think we still, like I said, I think we still do need to have some conversation around what's going to come out of this committee tonight. I think if we look at whoever decides to make this motion, I think we need to think about this year as being somewhat exceptional from previous years. So I think we do have, like Lisa said, you do have a 3% 3 to 3.5% cost of living adjustment that people are seeing, and that's something that people are seeing all over the country right now. And then we have, what's happened over the last year, which has been outside of the norm. I think that we're in this weird place in between hybrid and traditional, where I think the city clerk's office is doing a little bit of both right now. And I think there's been a lot of adjustments. There's been things that 2 years ago we would not have thought we would have had to deal with. And it's been, the majority of that has fallen upon the city clerk's office. And then we've got elections and everything that's happened with that. I mean, COVID has thrown such a monkey wrench into everything that we've been doing that it's been a little bit of an extraordinary year. So I think that keep that in mind when you make that motion. And then I think if we can make that motion with a few sort of reasons for why that is, if it's the impacts of COVID, hybrid meetings, elections, and then being short-staffed for the majority of the year, I think those things are things that we need to consider. And then after we get that motion, I think if we can get another motion to talk about goals for the next year. So before we do that, any other questions or comments? Okay. Councilor McLean.
Yeah, I would just offer the comment before that motion comes that, excuse me, that we might want to also consider trying to establish a range, as right now we are working on just a number. And so it would be good to have some sort of guiding star for growth as well. And I also kind of feel like maybe we should talk about the goal setting first before we get the motion on the number, because how ambitious we're asking our clerk to be may figure into what we want to establish as the room for growth.
Councilor McCarthy. And I want to note that Councilor McCarthy has joined us.
Thank you. Had another neighborhood meeting about a seawall earlier. I just got off of it. Thank you, Madam. Oh my God. Thank you, Mr. Chair, not being a member of the committee. Okay, I know we're talking about the compensation for the city clerk's position. I guess my question is, and I know I see Councilor Riccardi on board. I mean, so are the suggestion going to be, are we going to adjust the ordinance? Is there going to be a recommendation to change the ordinance relative to the city clerk's salary shall be reevaluated every February, and the finance committee shall make a recommendation to the mayor relative to the city clerk's compensation for the budgets, whatever the year's budget cycle is? I mean, it's got to be, right now there's like, we started with this a couple, last year. There's like two competing ordinances, so to speak, that are kind of against each other. So now it becomes, okay, what's the recommendation going to be? Are we going to set goals of which that, once, to achieve the goals? Because I know that when it comes down to every department head outside of the city clerk, Lisa and her team goes through and they make that assessment. And, sometimes it is tough because the market is changing, and I freely understand that. And you have people that you want to retain because you look at them and say, okay, this person is way out of the salary range now, so we're going to give them a slightly bigger bump than we're giving everyone else because we corrected them 2 years ago or 3 years ago or one last year. I know we're always making changes. I mean, and which sometimes it can become a little contentious sometimes because, all of a sudden you look at a year and not every department head just got a 3% raise. Some got more, some, everyone got the 3%, but you'll see a couple of them that will get 4 or 5 or maybe a little more because it was like that adjustment period because we want to retain them. So if we're are we looking to establish a range that we're going to send to the mayor, or are we looking to establish a number? Here's the number. This is the number we're going to go. So this is the number that we want you to include in the budget for the clerk's position because we as the city council take it upon because of ordinance. We're going to set the number, and here's our recommendation what that number should be. And I guess I wasn't involved in the early discussions. Because I could go back in my finance book. It's sitting over in the corner of the room someplace. What was last year? The department heads all got, was it 3%? And I guess the question was, what was the ask from the clerk's office for the clerk for her increase last year relative to everyone else getting 3%? And I could go into my book and find it, but since I don't have it in front of me, does someone have that answer? Either Lisa or Eileen?
So I will comment, a majority of the positions that are not, were in any kind of covenant of collective bargaining agreements was 3%, pretty much 3% across the board, nothing less than that.
Okay. And everyone was asking, and we once then for members who are on this call who are members of the finance committee, not members of this committee. We'll see that when we get into budget season, the departments come in asking for X. The mayor puts a budget in front of us that's hers, which is Y. And then that's pretty much what we go with. Who's sharing their screen?
This is the ordinance. I just want to put it up there for reference. So I guess just to address the first portion, we do have a second item in government services to discuss personnel boards.
Okay.
We'll take that up at a different time. Right now, it's just to look at this specific item. My opinion, and you Councilor McCarthy, you tell me what you think about this, but my opinion is that the ordinance is somewhat vague, but it's, I think, clear enough that it does give us the authority to set the pay and to set the goals moving forward.
I think that part of the recommendation, whatever the body decides, excuse me, Mr. Chair,
Sure.
should be that one of the recommendations is tighten up this ordinance relative to make sure it's definitively clear. The city council shall review the compensation of the city clerk's position in the month of February, and in the month of March, make a recommendation to either the full council or to send it to the mayor relative to compensation, so that the mayor, because the mayor, whoever he or she may be, is going to have to craft a budget based on numbers. And so that's a number you got to plug into the budget. Whatever that number is, that's the number that gets in there. So and so that's what they need to know moving forward with is whoever it is planning the budget. So you want to give it to them in a timely manner. So it should come probably no later than, I know the departments are crafting their budgets now and going into the mayor, having their meetings with her now. And we're in February. So it should come no later than probably the 1st of March. in order for, just with regard to that one line item in the budget. Then the clerk would then go in for her normal meeting with as a department head, sit down with the mayor relative to everything else in their budget, supplies, union personnel, and everything. So that's just my opinion. I just proposed ordinance. There you go. Look at you. You're so good.
And actually, if we want to, I'm happy to take a look at that right now. That might be a pretty quick edit here. I think that if we were to strike,
Yeah, because right now, because I'm going by that, that's salaries based on from 1990 or something like that. It's like 60 grand or something like that. 1999 or 98, I remember.
Yeah.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
City clerks shall receive such compensation for their services as shall be determined by the city council. Your recommendation, Council McCarthy, was to say in the month of February.
Yeah, she'll probably review the compensation in the month of February and report out no later than, first meeting in March to the mayor, something like that. I think that just makes it clean. And the city council, whoever the individuals are that are sitting in these seats that we occupy right now, have it clearly defined as what their duties and are moving forward. Because right now, it seems okay, but it's like you can read between, there's big gaps between the lines. So we want to tighten it up to make it very definitive of what's expected.
To the mayor by what date?
I would say by the first meeting in March. That's just my opinion. Not being a member of the committee, I can't make those suggestions.
The city clerk shall receive such compensation for their services as shall be determined by the city council. The city council shall review the city clerk's salary in the month of February and shall report their determination to the mayor by the first meeting in March. And then we remove the portion about 60,500. Future salary increases shall be based upon the clerk's goals established, accomplishments, responsibilities, and performance. Should we put in here as determined by the city council?
Yep. And I will say, for anyone who hasn't had a chance to look at last year's budget or review a budget and really take a look at it, the city clerk, as well as every department, comes in with their cover sheet on their section of the budget, comes in with goals. And a lot of those are available online, so you can go back and look at what, not just at the clerk, but in this case, we're talking about the clerk, but any department, what their goals have been and what they've met or accomplished, what their accomplishments were relative to each year from year to year. So that's a matter of public record, but it's in the budget.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion on this amendment to the ordinance?
Could I ask a question, Counselor? Just because I don't want to be out of turn, but I just want to comment on this process. Is that all right? Or if it's not, I'll hold my thought.
No, please.
So I do know that when this group or some of the councils, when we met in December, I think there was a plan to sort of clean this ordinance up. And I think that there's an order for myself and the city solicitor to work on something as well. So I just would ask that you just sort of keep that piece in mind. I don't know if Councilor Morcillo, you were part of that. I feel as if there was part of an order where at least the city solicitor and myself were going to sort of try to sort through these ordinances and work on this as well. So I would just offer that out there just as A, assistance, and B, just to keep that in mind. And the other thing is, I don't know that you want to just give yourself, might want to do an honor before to give yourself a little leeway and a little room on when you want to have something in. So I'm just saying that I don't know the timeline. I do know that, the budget packets, we're doing things a little differently this year with this, with the finance director. We're hopefully doing most of it in our software system, Munis. So I don't know when those meetings with the mayor, because typically what happens is we put together requests, we ask for everything, and then we go in and we talk to the mayor and we defend it. And then after she's met with all the different departments, then some of us will get together with her again and sort of go through. And then again, that's when we would look at the salary survey. Not that that really applies here, but Just want to give you a little bit of the process. And then what'll happen is she'll make her cuts or additions or whatever. And then those budgets are sent back to the department heads. And that's also then what gets sent to the council. And then we go to you on the night of our hearing to sort of explain, what our final requests are, because by then it's been pared down. So I'm not saying what you're doing is, this definitely needs to happen. I just want to make sure that we just keep in mind that we still need to talk with the city solicitor and just make sure on this timeline. I don't want you to sort of box yourself into a timeline that you may have more time on it, is all I'm getting at. And Councilor McCarthy, I hope you don't mind that I sort of interjected all of that, but especially depending on, where we're at with Munis, because I said, this is a new year for us. I mean, last year Anna came in, in 3 weeks, turned the budget around. This year we are starting early with a new process. But I do know this was something we wanted to clean up by then as well. So I just kind of wanted to add a little bit more flavor to all of this. Thank you.
I always like the language on or before, because that just gives you a little bit of flexibility. So it's not a hard date. So that gives you a definitive end date. So, I mean, I'm just thinking early March would be better, but it may be the second meeting in March but you could go on or before the second meeting in March. That way, if you have the information prior, you can offer it up. But if you don't, because if you're still compiling data or evaluating, I mean, it'll give you a little more flexibility. I don't, sometimes hard dates give you set a goal for the body to get an answer, but at the same time, it's also you don't want to set an unrealistic timeline that you can't meet in order to meet the ordinance, which would be problematic as well. Hence, as we're taking up the compensation for the mayor, because by ordinance, it's to be reviewed I don't know, whatever the language says. It's supposed to be reviewed after she gets elected. So,
For 3 months.
yeah, whatever it is. So it's like one of those things. We need that whole list of ordinances that we're supposed to do in a timely manner relative to whatever is election cycle and or calendar month in the calendar. So yeah, I think the language, a little more flexibility would be probably better off. And I appreciate the Human Resources Director for making that recommendation. And once again, not being a member of the committee, I actually don't have a say in this. So,
but it's appreciated. So I have the city council shall review the city clerk's salary in or before the month of February and shall report their determination to the mayor on or before the first meeting in March. And obviously I can run this through the city solicitor just to see what her feedback is before our full council meeting. Is this sort of what we're all thinking about here? Does anyone want to make a motion on this?
I'll move that we accept this and propose it to the council.
Okay. Councilor Cohen moves that we accept this. Do we have a second? Sorry, I don't have you all in front of me right now. Let me
Second.
Let me stop sharing my screen so I can see you all. Seconded by Councilor Varela. Let me just make sure I get these notes in. Councilor Varela.
Yes, Chair Hepler.
Councilor Watson-Felt.
Yes.
Councilor McLean.
No.
It's a no for Councilor McLean. And Councilor Cohen.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So we have 5 votes, 4 in favor, 1 opposed. Okay, I guess so now, so if we're gonna make that ordinance change, we also need to now discuss what the actual salary increase or what it will be. So do we have a motion on that or any further discussion that we want to have around the salary increase and reasons for the salary increase? Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. I just want to address the question that was offered by Councilor McLean a little bit ago, that we maybe take up the goals as first part of the conversation, in case it might additionally influence the thoughts about the motion on the increase.
Can I get, absolutely, can I get clarity on, so Councilor McLean, you want to discuss the go forward before we discuss the look back?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean, Mr. Chair, by go forward and look back.
So the go forward would be, setting the goals would be for FY23, setting some broad goals for FY23. The look back would be, here's what happened, here's why we're giving a pay increase. I'm fine doing it either way. I just was curious what the rationale was for flipping it.
I guess the rationale was to do the look forward and the look back before we discuss the numbers, so that if we're going to establish aggressive goals, then we can compensate for that, or at least establish a range that creates room for those goals to be accomplished. And also, I was going to ask you a question while I raised my hand. There seem to be two different numbers for the clerk's base pay in the couple of documents that I'm looking at, so I'm not actually sure what number we would be
This is
acting on.
the 99 versus the 100.
Yes.
So I think, is Lisa still with us? I believe she is. We discussed that this morning.
Yeah, do you want me to answer that, or did you?
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, so that is the base pay. The actual number in the budget, I think, is 100 and a little bit more, because when we do the budgets, they do it for the actual length of, she spreads it out for like 52.2 sometimes, or 52.4, but it's actually the actual annual salary is 99,954. So that is the correct number. The 100,000 is not correct.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so discussing the I guess the goals and accomplishments. So if we want to discuss accomplishments first, is there any thoughts around that? This will be just what we put into the what comes out of committee. Go ahead, Councilor McCarthy.
I'm sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair, not being a member of the committee. Could someone just, the one last question I have, and then not being a member of the committee, I'll sit back and let you guys do your work, was relative to last year. And the Human Resources Director said that everyone got all the department heads got a 3% raise. Does someone have a budget book in front of them? And because actually, after I finish this question, I'll go look it up myself. What was the ask last year for the position? I mean, we approved 3%, but what was the ask overall? I guess is my bigger question. And I see Councilor Masillo breaking out a budget book. I'm gonna have to go grab mine. So does Lisa, do you have that number, or?
No, but I don't know that that would be in the budget books that you got, right? Because the budgets, so what we put together and ask for, what ends up coming out final for the budget book is going to be different.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like we'll get.
Then I'll put it right on the city clerk.
Yeah,
what was the ask?
She'd be able to tell you what she asked for, because the books that you get are after all the cuts are made.
Yeah,
You know
they got the proposed and then they got the mayoral. So I guess my question is, Eileen, what was the ask last year? If you can remember. If you can't, I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
I would rather go look that up.
Okay. I'll look it up myself too. Thanks.
Councilor Cardy, do you have a question or a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to note, I have the budget book in front of me. I was trying to do quick math to get a percentage for you, but the department request was 105, pretty even, versus the 100 that was given. So I was attempting to do quick math to get an actual percentage there, if anybody is quicker than me. But that is what the request was last year.
If I may, I believe, I think I talked to Councilor Hapworth. Did I say about 4,900 or something like that? I don't think it was an even amount. And that was what I asked for last year. But I would like that to be reconsidered. A whole other year has gone by, and doing more of my own research. I would, that's why I'm waiting for the counselors to see what is proposed.
Council Riccardi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make one other comment, and that was right. Yeah, so just under 5,000 last year, so like 4.9%. I just wanted to make another quick comment though, to kind of circle back to something that was said earlier, which I think we all agree on, is staffing. You know, we can throw as much money as we want to at this, but there's still only a limited number of people for the work that needs to be done. And I wouldn't want, I just want it to be known that I would fully support an additional staff increase along with, you know, whatever comes out of the committee or discussions this evening, because it's not going to solve, I think, the root issue of just the workload has changed over the past few years. It's changed for multiple departments, multiple people, and we really need to be able to handle that workload efficiently and properly. So I wanted to make that one point regarding bodies and people, and to not to have this be anything to like mentally block you from requesting people. And then the second point is I'm very interested in, along with people, that's one way to help your workload, but also I just want to point out, because I do have to drop this evening, that I think a goal of efficiency is also really important to make sure that we really move this. I feel like I might constantly be tooting this one, but to not necessarily make the job different, but to make it more efficient, to really use the new modern tools, I guess, that we have. You know, if there's software that we can buy, apps that we can buy to make agenda building easier, to make really just the life in the office easier, so it's not as much people power is needed, because there are a lot of tools and things change constantly. I mean, I work in the IT world, and I'm constantly learning, you know, new tools that can help me do my job daily. So those are just kind of the 2 points that I wanted to make before I had to drop this evening. But thank you everyone for the information that was provided, and looking forward to seeing the recommendations that come from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Riccardi. Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. I wanted to echo exactly those 2 points that Councilor Riccardi just made, that I would also support an increase in staffing requests to support the work. And also, as you and I actually once discussed, I think that there is an opportunity for tech enhancement or an increased use of tools in digitizing records and things even coming to Eileen in maybe a pre-digitized way. So there's even less time spent on handling paper, you know, all obviously within the guidelines that are required. There's got to be a series of process efficiencies that we could also look at. And I wonder, in addition to that, I just wonder how we get those things included in the conversation tonight in a way that's captured. Some of those may be goal setting as a part of the city clerk's position, but some of it is kind of on us to figure out what the right processes are to recommend. So I don't, because it won't necessarily be performance based, unless we say like, here's a thing we're rolling out and this is now the expectation. So I'd like to hear from the group on how we kind of evolve from those 2 points into how we walk away with a set of expectations, goals for the year.
Eileen.
If I may, to respond to Council Watson-Felt and Council Riccardi, who's probably might be more aware, and Council Marcillo and some of them that have been here last year. So I started to look at software agenda management companies. There's not a lot. The biggest one is Granicus. I attended their Granicus University. Had to go to school for, I forget how many hours it was, but it was a very, for me, a very large undertaking. There was a couple of other companies that seemed a little bit intuitive, or something that I feel as though would be more easily adaptable to me. And I reached out to that, one of the companies again, and Council Marcillo, and I believe it was Council Riccardi is going to be joining me in one of those demonstrations. And at this time, I do have CIP money I'm not sorry, not CIP money, in my budget for software management, to purchase software management in the amount of $23,000. So that was a goal that I had set, started looking into it and, did some research and, and of course, had to stop with the elections. But so that is something that's being looked at. Anybody want to teach a old dog new tricks? I'm at work more of the time than I can get on, and always want like, oh, let's go to Salem State and take an Excel class, or or whatever. How don't get around to it. So if anybody want, I can pick up things pretty quickly on technology. So anybody, I know we tried the share drive before with the city council in the mayor's office a few years ago, that they could look at everything that the mayor dropped in there. But I'd be more than happy to look at that. But as you had said, Council Watson felt, there are some state laws and regulate that I do have to keep hard copies, paper trails, and such. And if you look back in our records, although sometimes it's difficult, I can find something, or the previous clerk could find something, and hoping leaving in a pretty similar situation, not that things can't change, but to be able to find something, going back. So I just try to balance that. Not that I'm against change, or, it's just trying to balance that. Like, what is this software going to do for me, make it easier, but at the same time, leave the paper trail that I need to leave. So that's the balance in mind.
Councilor Watson-Felt. You're on mute again.
Again, thank you, Chairperson Hapworth. Is there just one last question, and then I saw President Marcella's hand go up. The question is there a line item in the budget for the city clerk, or a stipend particular to her salary that is dedicated to continued education or educational opportunities to enhance her efficiencies at her job, or learn new skills, or anything like that? Dedicated money?
Not sure if I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure if anyone has. Eileen, if you have the answer.
I'm seeing people nod their heads.
Yeah, there is not. My stipends are oh my gosh, I can't like clerk to the council, board of register. Yeah, so that's the list. At one point we had in there educational reimbursement, but a lot of that was also for the counselors. I have used that, like where I am right now in Devon's. It's not a technical educational class, but it's like Michelle Tastaneri, the election counsel for the Secretary of State's office, will be, having a class tomorrow. Lauren Goldberg, who is from KP Law, who's the biggest attorney for municipal government laws. She'll be given a class. It's other things that I need, like inflammable licenses and vital records. So I'm in. That's where I am right now.
Which I'm excited for you about, by the way. Where does that money come from? I may have missed. I think you may have said I missed it.
What? I'm sorry. What money? I'm so sorry.
So for when you want to go to a conference or take a class, or where does that?
In my wallet and my checkbook. I do ask when there is money left, like over for like dues and subscriptions or something that I can transfer from one account to another. I will ask for reimbursement, but usually it's out of pocket. Which I'm fine with. So, but that there is. So that's, like many of us, we all spend money out of our pocket for our jobs.
Yeah, thank you.
So I do try to get it back if there's money left over.
Yeah, there may be part of this conversation. This group may want to consider, including some kind of annual education stipend in this. Just throwing that out there. Thank you.
Councilor Cohen.
Councilor Marcillo had her hand up before me.
Councilor Marcillo. According to Zoom, Councilor Cohen had his hand up first, but Councilor Marcillo, go ahead.
I did it the old-fashioned way first. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to catch people up. Some of the other things we're doing besides looking into the agenda software is working on better making it more efficient as far as how Eileen's office works with the city councilors. There's a lot of stuff that happens information that's sent back and forth before this meeting, sending out the actual order for whatever the group is meeting on. All that stuff takes time, right? And it's actually stuff that the counselors should be doing themselves. It's not things that necessarily the city clerk's office needs to take care of. It's great that she does. I think we've all come to rely on it, probably a little too much. So one of the things that we're looking at is shared drives for each of the subcommittees, where the list of items in that committee is right there. The chair can update it, the city clerk can update it, it's all in one place. Each of the members of the committee can go in there and look to see what's in the committee, the actual orders, so that at the last minute, the city clerk's office doesn't have to send it out to all of the counselors. We don't go into meetings and say, do you have this in front of you? And half the people say, no, I don't. It's just going to put the burden back where it belongs on the city councilors themselves. You know, all of this stuff came through the city council meetings at one point or another. And so we should all be able to find the orders, the original orders, but this will at least put it all in one spot. So Councilor Riccardi's been working on this for Ola. We need to show Eileen how to do this efficiently for all 5 groups, give everyone access to all of these different shared drives, and maybe utilize that approach for other things in her department, for getting the agenda items, for instance, from all the different departments. Maybe there's a shared drive where it all has to be in Microsoft Word format, or whatever we come up with that works with that agenda software. So it's going to take time to go through the processes to make this more efficient. And if you have any ideas, definitely talk them through with the city clerk. But with it comes training. And so whatever we do, we need to kind of go through it ourselves first, and then teach her and her staff how to support us in that, and take some of the burden off of her. I think that's the bottom line, is make her job more efficient. That's it. Thank you.
Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. It seems like today a shared drive popped up from Councilor Hapworth for this subcommittee. So that's
just the group that we created for,
okay.
so I don't have to type your names in every time I send an email.
Well, that goes with what I was going to say. So as the oldest person in this room by far, efficiency to me is like figuring out how to make sure my Venmo doesn't come out of my bank account. And so I'm very happy that there are counselors and other people here who are tech savvy and are going to help out with the efficiency. I do have a different goal or a suggestion for the future. I've talked to a few people in this room about how we can increase the participation from the public, which I've always felt is something that we've been delinquent at. And one thing that I thought might be something to consider is maybe a quarterly show on SATV by Eileen and her staff to educate the public about the voting process and other things that happen through the clerk's office and how to gain better access. Because a lot of people in our community, as much as we'd like to think they understand how government works, really don't have access for whatever reason, or don't feel they do, and really don't know how to get things done. So that's an idea that I had, and I don't know if it's something that makes sense to everyone in this call, but I feel like a lot of the stuff that we value in the clerk's office could be, you know, transcended to the public through something like a show on SATV.
Thank you, Councilor Cohen. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Morsillo? And then Councilor McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did forget one part of what I was going to update the group on, and that is with this new agenda software will probably come the need and a budget item for iPads for each of the counselors that we'll use for our agendas and our backup and accessing the shared drives, all that stuff. That's a budget item also. part of, she in her office still print out agendas and backup for some of the counselors. So understanding that stuff, understanding why that's happening and offloading that, if we need to get a few printers, which by the way are very cheap, that would offset some of what she's doing. So that kind of budget stuff is also going to come into play if we do choose one of these agenda software things to make her life easier. It's kind of a, it's a complicated process, right? It's not just something that happens overnight. There's buying the software, there's all the hardware support, there's making sure our IT department is up to date with the software and can support us, can support the iPads for each of the counselors and printers even, if we need that. So I just want to throw that out there. That's all part of in the mix too.
Council McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very much appreciate the update from Councilor Morcillo. It's great to hear some of the things that are already being worked on. I think the ability to organize and track what's going on in committee more independently is an excellent idea. I absolutely agree that some of this is stuff that the councilors should be doing on their own. And it is also something that I have from time to time been asked about by residents in terms of how do I figure out what has been sort of sent to committee? Like, where's a list that I can see? And so I think that transparency is powerful, not only for us, but for the public. And I think that dovetails really nicely with Councilor Cohen's comments about sort of having an educational capacity to what we're talking about. One of the goals that I would really like to put on the table is more geared towards a community that we have a very hard time engaging in the city, which is our Latino, Latina, Latinx community, which tends to come up around election time and then kind of moves to the rear. I know that our clerk put a lot of energy into tracking our ability to get our materials printed in multiple languages for our elections. I know I believe we crossed that threshold, which is excellent news. And so I would really like to double down on that. I would really like to explore how we can introduce translation services to our meetings, some of which are available in software-based format, some of which could be live, but we're moving into a hybrid world. And so creating our agendas, having our minutes processed, having that ability for people to participate from that little corner of Salem, I think could be really powerful. And to some of the comments about getting more staff support for the clerk's office, I agree 110%, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we are in a very difficult hiring market. As many of us probably know, there's no guarantee that we'll be able to secure staff support for the clerk's office in the medium term, even if we can secure the money. And so I think we should be really intentional about acknowledging that work is going to have to get done in the meantime, no matter what. And so if Eileen and her team are going to be doing that work in the interim, then we should compensate them for that.
Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, not being a member of the committee. I think we just need to get back to what we're trying to accomplish tonight. We need to get back on focus. First of all, if you want to propose an ordinance change, that has to go back to the Committee on Ordinances, License, and Legal Affairs. Your committee can't do ordinance changes. So what you looked at or what was recommended earlier, that has to get referred to another committee, because this committee doesn't have the ability to change an ordinance. So that's the first thing. The second thing is what's the goal for this evening? Is the goal for this evening to continue to try to figure out what the goals are, which are very great goals. Don't get me wrong. I agree with Council McLean wholeheartedly. We've been working for years trying to, secure the ballots in bilingual, and we just got, notified by the state that we actually qualified now, so that will happen. I think that's a great first step. And how do you expand on that? And those are goals. But at the same time is, when we start talking about staffing issues, I'm not, we can sit here and have these discussions, but as the way the ordinance is written, we only have the ability to set the rate for the city clerk. The rest of the department falls under union negotiations. They're all ASME employees, which falls directly under the mayor. So the mayor goes through and figures out, Eileen and will craft a budget, and she may ask for one additional full-time employee, maybe an employee and a half, and it all depends what the mayor will approve, because that's what's under the mayor's jurisdiction, which makes the clerk's office kind of a morphed office, which is kind of a strange situation, but it's a situation, that's the way it's constructed. So we as counselors can set the goals for the clerk, which then in turn she sets them for her department, of which she's responsible because she manages the department, for her staff to help her achieve those goals, so then that we can compensate her, and hopefully that translates into compensation for the rest of the department. But all the non-union employee, that would be for non-union employees, but the union employees all fall back under the jurisdiction of the mayor. And that budgeting process, of which anyone is welcome to go and sit with the city clerk and go in for her meeting with the mayor and lobby the mayor to help try to make her understand that that would be the best solution for her department, to have an additional 1 or 1.5 FTEs. So we just got to refocus on, it's a great broad-based discussion, but we have to focus on what we're trying to achieve tonight relative to what's in front of you. Because, some of it's going to have to be referred to different stuff. You may make a financial recommendation that may come out of this committee, or may have to go to the finance committee for their recommendation. There's a whole bunch of, it all depends how it works out. So we all like to think it's easy, but it's never easy. It's government, it's complicated. So, but we, as it's been brought to our attention, I've been on the council for a long time. I can only think of one other time that the city council has intervened in the discussion of compensation for the clerk's position. So it's basically always it's fall under the department head, and usually gets the same compensation as the rest of the department heads, or an adjustment relative to salary surveys. But if it's going to fall squarely on the council, then the recommendation should be, once again, not my words, that that we work to establish goals, that the goals are set, and then what the salary range is. This is all new stuff for us, because like I said, we haven't done this. This has usually been, the salary surveys and have usually been done by staff, the human resources department, the legal department. And now if we're going to take this on, that's fine. I understand it, because that's the way it's written. If that we want to enforce that, then we have to be willing to take on that extra work, and also rely on, the existing people who already do that. But at the same time is realizing that when we talk about trying to increase the clerk's staff, we do not have jurisdiction over that. The way the ordinance is written, we only have jurisdiction over the clerk. So I just feel like I had to throw that out there. I think they're valid discussions, with relative to the history of the department, and where it's been and where it's going. But we need to, I think, Mr. Chair, I think we just need to focus on trying to, move this forward, so we're not sitting here a couple weeks from now trying to figure out what the parameters are and how we're going to compensate the clerk. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Councilor McCarthy. I agree 100%. I think that the goals coming out of committee tonight should be for some sort of a salary increase, and we need to understand that we we set that, we by ordinance, we set the salary for the city clerk, but we don't have a budget. We don't have money that we give out of our own budget. That does come from the mayor. So that ultimately, this is sort of a recommendation that, you know, we have final say over the budget, but this is sort of a recommendation that goes to the mayor's office. And when that budget comes out, we hope to see the recommendation that we met based on our role in setting the city clerk's salary. So I think what I'm hearing tonight, and Councilor McCarthy makes a good point. We shouldn't put goals upon the city clerk, which she doesn't necessarily control, or that we as a council don't necessarily control. But I think what I'm hearing tonight is I think there's a will for a salary increase. I think there is an understanding that the reason a salary increase should happen is because you've got a year over the last year that the city clerk dealt with a lot of changes around COVID and hybrid and remote meetings, an election, staffing issues. I think all of these things combined with just what we're seeing in other communities, you know, there's certainly a range in salaries out there that goes from the 80s up to the 120s. But I think that when you look around where a lot of communities are at, I think they're at somewhere between 105 and 110. I think it seems like a very reasonable place where a lot of people sit right now. I think there is a cost of living adjustment that's going to happen. So I think all of those combined, we should have some sort of recommendation for a pay increase. And then I think what I'm also hearing for goals is I think I'm hearing that there is a desire to have the city clerk make use of technology. It's gonna be something that we're going to need to do just with the complexity of these hybrid meetings that we're moving forward into. Something that we need to help out with as well, because there's things that happened in the past that don't need to happen in the future. But just very broadly making use of current technology to make her job easy, I think is a very fair goal to set. I think I'm also hearing just a need to increase, or just to ensure we maintain fair and accessible elections, which is something she always tries to do anyways, but just something to keep in mind. And then finally, just a very, very broad carrying out the duties prescribed by city ordinance. I mean, it's all laid out within our ordinances, what the city clerk should be doing and what she's in charge of. And I think just, setting that as one of the 3 goals, I think would be important. But we are coming up on 8 o'clock now, 2 hours in. So just want to know if anybody wants to make a motion and what that should look like. We talked in very broad generalities, but I think we need to get down to specifics here. Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. Concerning making a motion, are we setting the motion or a recommendation for an actual dollar amount, a percentage, or a range?
I think we should be making, in my opinion, there's nothing that has to come out of this committee, but in my opinion, it should be a specific dollar amount that comes out of this committee as a recommendation to the full council.
All right, I'd like to make a motion. Start.
Councilor Varela.
I'd like to make a motion to set the city clerk's salary to $118,000. Start with that.
Councilor Varela makes a motion to set an even 118. Can we just, before we make that motion, I just want to see what percentage increase that would come out to. I think it should be, yeah. I mean, obviously it's close to 100 now, so it should be that's an 18% increase that Councilor Varela is recommending. Do we have a second for a recommendation of $118,000? So we're under discussion right now, I guess. So I think that's a good place to be, but I think that we need to, we look at something that's an 18% increase is a little bit higher than you might normally see in any position. And I think not that Eileen doesn't deserve that. Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. I just want to mention that obviously this is a recommendation, and obviously when coming to the mayor, I'm assuming that number will most likely be pared down. So
I think that's a good way to look at that. I think that the hope is that because we set the city clerk's salary, that the mayor will take our recommendation as is prescribed by city ordinance that she should. So I think we can get as not a negotiation, but as close to an accurate figure as we can. I think that, you know, a number like 108 or 109, I feel like is reasonable here for looking at a 3% cost of living adjustment, you know, at least a 5% increase based on what's happened over the last year, getting us close to somewhere between a 9% or so increase, I think is probably in my personal opinion, it's up to the committee, but is a fair place to be. Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hackworth. I agree with you. I will make a motion that we set the salary for fiscal 2023 at 109,000.
Just get that down. So Councillor Cohen moves that we set the city clerk's salary at $109,000. We have a second. Councillor Watson-Felt. Is that a second or is that a question?
It's a question. In full transparency, Chair, I struggle with the numbers without knowing what the percentages are. So I like that you just broke that out. That was really helpful. So just for my own clarity, as I follow the conversation, is the motion on the table to suggest that this is a little over a 9% increase on the base salary of the city clerk at present?
Yep. So this would be looking at, this is a 9, roughly a 9. I mean, she's at about 100 right now. So this is about a 9% increase. I think if you look at that as, if you're looking at the 3% cost of living adjustment plus, you know, I think typically in an average, at least for most people, they look at between 3 and 5% increases if they're performing. So that's a little bit above where you might normally be, but I think that's not unfair. I mean, in my personal opinion, not an unfair place to be.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. It looked like there was another question before moving on. Sorry, did I lose that?
If we don't have a second, is there someone who'd like to make another motion? Councilor McLean.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion that we increase the city clerk's base pay by 3% to $102,953.38, and that we add a $1,000 stipend relative to her work for the elections, which would bring her total compensation to $110,753.38. So it's a 3% increase on the base pay plus an additional $1,000 stipend for elections, gets us to about 110, which is about the number we're kicking around.
So a 3% increase and $1,000 stipend.
That's correct.
I may not personally understand the way the stipends work. Lisa, can you explain that? I'm not sure if I understand the rationale behind or how you get to 110. Or actually, Councilor McLean, if you the way you looked at it.
I looked at the base pay of $99,954. I did 3% on that, so that's how I got the initial calculation. And then I looked at the other items for which she is being provided stipends: $4,000 for clerk of council, $1,600 clerk board of registrars. There's 4 in there. So I just added 1 for elections because that has clearly been an increasing portion of the work that she's doing and is going to continue to be an increasing portion of the work. And so until additional support staff show up, she should be compensated for that.
So you're saying add an additional $1,000 to the stipends to get to the 110.
Correct.
So Councilor McLean has a motion to increase the base pay by 3%, bring it to roughly 102, and add $1,000 stipend. This is just a recommendation going to council. Do we have a second? Not a second. Do we have another motion? I mean, I appreciate that we're taking a lot of thought and care in doing this.
For my part, Chair, I am also cross-referencing the spreadsheet. So if you see my eyes darting all around, I'm trying to make sure that I'm cross-referencing back again before offering a vote. I know this is only a recommendation, but to your point, I want to be really, really mindful about it. And I think it's, so where I am currently at right now is closer to your suggestion. But I wonder if it makes sense to include in the city clerk's compensation a line item for education and advancement. So that would be considered a benefit, you know, an additional number. So I'm not ready to make a motion yet on that. I'm going through it and you know, but I think that 3 is low because 3 is standard. I think what I hear this group saying is that we're talking about a standard plus, because it feels as though the message that I'm hearing both from the city councilors that have been counselors prior to this group, as well as the city clerk in last year's recommendation and what ended up happening and all of that, is that this has kind of been an ongoing conversation to bring her a little bit back up towards where it would be generally considered a fair compensation for the amount of work. I know that there are other factors in there. So I'm still processing all of that. I'm sorry. I feel like we're not quite fully there yet, but I think we're getting a lot closer. So, Madam City Clerk, thanks for your patience while we work through this live.
And that's completely fair. I think that, you know, this isn't something anyone should take lightly in any job, is the compensation of others. So that's fair. Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. I'm going to move that the salary is $109,000, which will include $1,500 for education and travel.
Councillor, just to clarify, is the base salary 109, or is the base salary inclusive of the $1,500 for travel and education?
Oh, before I answer that, Councilor McCarthy.
Councilor McCarthy?
Typically, education and travel comes under another part of the budget. It doesn't come under personnel. It comes under expenses. A lot of departments have line items for all of that kind of stuff. So to include it in there, it's back when I started as a city councilor, we got X amount of money, but we also got money as a stipend for paperwork and filing and all sorts of stuff. And then when they finally realized that in order for them to really do that legally, we'd all have to declare, put a spreadsheet report as to what money we spent on ink and paper and stuff. So we just kind of rolled it all into a salary. So if your intention is to, you know, compensate the clerk more, then you should figure out a way to do that. If you want to lobby to put line items in for, you know, travel expenses, and then that's in a separate part of the budget that comes up during the budget process. And this is all very difficult because I just, you know, some of you know me for a while, some of you we've got to know each other over the last year or so. I've known the clerk for a long time, and this is awkward as awkward it is for me. It's as awkward as it is for you. I can't even imagine what it's like to be Eileen sitting there right now, and they're all like, someone's throwing out a number. It says, you know, this is what we think that the clerk should be compensated, and you know, it's very difficult. And you know, she and her staff, they do a really great job. And just to kind of put it in their perspective, you know, pre last year's budget, the city clerk's salary was basically base salary, not including all the other stipends for being a clerk of the council and clerk of registrars and the other items. Basically, the clerk was $97,000, round numbers. It makes it easier for me. And then she got 3%, which brought her up to basically the 99,000 that she's currently at base. I believe from the conversations from last year's discussions, she was looking for 105,000, which based on her initial salary from a year and a half ago, from 97, that would have been about a 9% increase she was looking for, and she got a 3%. So anticipating that, and once again, it's not a certain, because I've seen department heads go anywhere from 1 to 4% over a given year. Depends on the year and how the forecasts look. So, but if you base it on an annual cost of living, as say round numbers 3%, and what the clerk left on the table last year was, in her opinion, was 6%. So she's going to get the 3 anyway, half of the 6. So you probably, somewhere probably, I don't know if it's the full 9% or if it's somewhere in between the 6 and the 9, maybe a 7.5% increase based on her base. And then if you
Okay,
want
so
to
I'm gonna amend my motion.
I mean, that's once again, that's just my opinion, and I'm just throwing it out there for discussion. But it's based on, because whatever we decide, whatever the decision is, and it goes to the full council, and whatever we all decide as a body, that's you have to come up with some rationale as to when you present it to the mayor is how you came up with your number. So based on that, maybe 7.5 maybe is the right. And if you want to talk about increasing maybe some of the stipends relative to elections, because let's be honest, I mean, the state, it's not Eileen's fault or anyone's fault. It's the state came through with a bunch of mandates that we now are putting a whole bunch of extra work on the clerk's office and Eileen and our entire staff relative to elections. But that's just me. I don't know what the number is. But based on what her anticipations were last year, and based on, if we're looking at a 3, and I'm not 100% sure, but I'll leave it for you guys to debate it out. But is when you're having the debate, I think it's a really great debate, but it's also based on what the rationale is, how you come up with a number, because it can't, because we have to justify it to ourselves as much as we have to justify it to anyone who asks us that question. And Eileen, you worked every penny, so.
This is my last attempt at a motion. Thank you, Councilor McCarthy.
I'm gonna
107.5 thousand with $1,000 stipend for elections. A total of 108.5 thousand.
So Councilor Cohen has made a motion to put the salary at 107,500 with a $1,000 election stipend. Do we have a second?
Can anybody roll up that?
I'm sorry.
Number? I'm sorry. Can somebody roll up that number, including all of the stipends, so we have a sense of what final compensation is?
And could I have the percentage?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's roughly a 7.5% increase. Because she's at roughly 100 right now, so that would be. Let's see. Yes, 7.6% increase.
So here was what I was going to suggest, if I may. 3% cost of living, 5% merit increase, even 8% increase as on the base. I think that we can address election stuff at another time, maybe following the resolution of potentially additional staff if it makes the cut in the final budget.
Is that a motion?
Sure. Yes. Just because I just need that percentage. I just think So I think that talking in percentages from a compensation standpoint also sets kind of a standard, right? Like we talk about the 3% cost of living because that is a standard thing. I think having a history of being able to discuss these things with regards to percentages reflecting whether it's merit or bringing her up to her, to a more equitable range, whatever the case may be. So I'm sorry that I get so hung up on that, but when we talk about flat numbers and it works out to not around percentage, I think it makes it difficult for posterity for discussion in the future. So that's why I would make the motion to say 3% cost of living, 5% on top to a one-time total 8% increase on base.
So Councilor McLean, you'd asked about where that all fits in. I think just based on my own calculations, that's an 8% increase here would have her new annual base just under 108. And then the total, including the stipend, would be 114,751. Just that's based on my calculations in my spreadsheet. Which, if you look at the average, that's certainly above the average is 108. But if you look at the top five municipalities in this spreadsheet here, and they're averaging as a final tally, including the stipend, somewhere around 128 or so, I think. So there's a huge range of people to compare it to, but I think that 114 kind of fits in there. Is there, before we take any more discussion, is there a second on Councilor Watson-Felt's? Councilor Cohen, is that a second?
Yes, but I also have a comment.
Okay, so seconded by so the motion is to set the salary at 108. Seconded by Councilor Cohen. Under discussion.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. Although I'm seconding this because I think the number is most important. So although I disagree with Councilor Watson-Felt's concept about percentage, I believe it should be that we compensate the person for what the position should be valued at. So I think we're getting to the same place, and I feel like it's an appropriate place, so I will vote favorably.
Any further discussion? Eileen.
Through you, Mr. Chair, for a point of clarification, is this 3% the COLA increase plus the 5%? Is that in I guess what I'm asking, is that going to be, will the merit increase that the mayor gives to non-union personnel be included in that, or is that going to be not given? Because if that 3% COLA is what will be coming for fiscal year 23 for non-union employees, then it's just a 5%. It's a 5% increase, which is basically what was asked for last year. And and is this going to be retro? Because then it's only 105 unless it's in addition to whatever the mayor gives out to her non-union management people.
So based on my reading of city ordinance, that would be we're setting this for FY23, so it would not be retro. And we're setting it, not the mayor. So we would be setting a rate that the mayor should accept and that would not be subject to any additional increases that came down from the mayor. That's my understanding. I'm open to other interpretations, but that's the way I would interpret what our ordinance says versus what we're here to do tonight. Any further discussion before we take a vote on this?
I have a question, Councilor Hepworth.
Councilor Watson.
Thank you. Does that mean, Madam City Clerk, then that last year's 3% did not come through the annual review by the council?
That is given by the mayor. Correct. That 3% is whatever the mayor mostly gives across the board to all management or non-union positions.
So then the follow-on question to that, Madam City Clerk, is that then the city council did not recommend any increase for you last year at all?
correct.
And- Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Nope, correct.
Okay, and then historically, has it been that the 3% or whatever the annual increase the mayor recommends has been given despite the ordinance as we're interpreting it tonight, saying that the city clerk the city council sets the pay, the compensation for the city clerk. You've always received the non-union added bump from that the mayor has put down for the rest of the employees at City Hall.
So like I'm considered, even though the council sets my salary, which doesn't typically happen, whatever the mayor decides on the budget to give for an increase mostly across the board, I do receive that, which I'm, always very thankful for, because nobody else, that's the only way I can get, that's the only way I get not a merit increase, whatever they call it. Merit increase is,
Yeah, or
I
cost
guess
of
what they
living or
put the
whatever.
column
Yeah.
there.
Okay,
And Lisa can correct me if I'm wrong, but so the only ways I get my increases is just like every other department head or non-union person that gets whatever the mayor sets across the board.
So I will comment on that that is actually how all of us have received increases over the years. And I think we talked about this earlier, that's kind of why this group convened, to follow that part of the ordinance where the council sets the salary, right? And so I think that's kind of why we're here, because I think when the city clerk mentioned an increase, when we started talking about this in October, that's when the competing ordinances came out, right? Like
right.
the personnel board setting the ranges and doing like they did, back 20 years ago. The decision was, I believe in the spirit of that ordinance was that the city clerk would just not come under a personnel board because it's a different position, right? The city clerk reports to the city council. So as that has sort of fallen over the years, as we talked about that before, right? There's been increases, 2%, 4.5%. I think there's a 5.8. It has just always been the recommendation of the mayor and then approved by the council of what was put forth for all management / non-union employees. And so that I think the reason how you've ended up, how this group is convened now is based on the request of the city clerk. Like I said, when we met in October, and then we realized there were competing ordinances. So, I'm not, it's definitely up to you, but to me, it sounded like this was to take care of that now, right? That's why this group is here, is what I thought I understood.
To be clear, to the subcommittee, thank you. I'm sorry, I should have said thank you, Lisa. My motion was to be all inclusive. So that would be the 3 that you would expect, or anyone could expect, plus an additional 5. So 8 all inclusive in accordance with the ordinance, and that the mayor would have no additional percentage added to that. Just for discussion, just to make sure that the intent was clear.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, on Councillor Watson-Felt's motion to Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. I guess I'm a little confused because I want to set the appropriate, pay for this coming year, but I'm going to throw this to the city clerk if she's willing. Are you looking for some remedy for not getting the 5% last year?
Eileen?
I don't know how to answer that. I guess I am. If that's your question.
So if there's no
The
further,
whole other year has gone by. Just remember that vote by mail is now permanent. I understand you're asking for the, the increase in staffing, which I will put in. and such. So I guess by not getting that last year, it still seems to, again, I'm not comparing it to anybody else. Still seems to not get me up to where I thought I would be.
So because I feel like we need to discuss that aspect, I'm going to withdraw my second.
Okay, so under discussion, what's the question that Councilor Cohen, if you want to clarify your question that you have?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning of our discussion, we talked about wanting to keep city employees who are doing a great job. And so I have a concern, and I want to make sure that that's alleviated. I don't know what the dollar amount makes sense to do to achieve that, but the numbers that we're bouncing around, percentages and whatever, are somewhat arbitrary in my mind. Inflation is very industry specific, for example, and we don't know what else is going to be in the budget for other department heads. So I just feel like it would make sense, at least in my mind, to figure out if there's a way to do to include maybe as a stipend, a one-time remedy.
So we're here, I mean, we are, just to be clear, we're setting the city clerk's salary for FY23. And we're setting it by city ordinance, which states that the city council sets the clerk's salary. It can be whatever this group wants. I don't want to get wrapped around the axle too much here. We can set it however we want to set it and make that recommendation to the mayor. We just need to make a motion and set that salary. If we think 108 is too low, we can make a different motion. But 108 is an 8% increase. Councilor McLean.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that Councilor Watson-Felt's motion is reasonable in terms of trying to give our clerk a bump while being sort of aware of the realities of the fact that we're making this decision within the context of a broader budget, and that we are encouraging our clerk to also seek additional personnel, which will also have budget implications. So, it's a difficult thing to do this in a public way. I think if we could all wave a magic wand, we would give Eileen exactly what she wants, because she's such a key player for everything that we do. But I would like to second Councilor Watson-Felt's motion.
Councilor Watson-Felt's motion, which once again is to set the salary at 108 for FY23, is seconded by Councilor McLean. Any further discussion before we take a vote?
Chairperson Hapworth, I would be curious to learn more about the expectations and the comfort of our city clerk who brought this last year. So if, for example, because what Councilor McLean just said is absolutely correct, right? Like working within the realities of like a budget and standard practice and all that kind of stuff. I would be amenable to doing the 3% plus the 5% plus an election stipend that was on the table earlier. I would love for the city clerk to have more staff. I understand that may not ultimately happen, and I don't want her not compensated for the additional work she's required to do. That having been said, if if the budget gets passed and there's, new staff and the burden is relieved, that's a different conversation. So I think it's challenging for me without more transparency into what Eileen wants, honestly, and how we get a little bit closer to that while staying sensible? Is it your 9%? Is that part of it? Or is it the 8% plus a stipend for the year that we reassess in the next year depending on staffing? How can I help? How can we help?
Well, the way, and again, not saying anything would have been guaranteed last year, but it's, you know, I asked for the 5,000 last year. Now a year's gone by and now I'm looking, people are agreeable to that amount a year later. So I guess I am looking for the 10% to make it a 110. If that's amenable. The election stipend, I mean, I rather not have a stipend because it affects retirement. I mean, if it's 9%, 10%, I'd be more than happy with that. You know, and that way, without the stipend, it goes towards retirement as well, which would be.
So 10%, Chair Hapworth, since you're the one clearly with the calculator at hand, is 110 base plus the 60, was it 6,200 in stipends?
6,800 in stipends is what I think is on Lisa's spreadsheet.
So total compensation of 116,
750.
750.
116, 750 is the way I would calculate that. So we still have I think we still have a motion on the floor for 108, seconded by Councillor McLean. Any further discussion? Okay, and we'll take a vote. Councillor McLean,
Yes.
Councillor Cohen,
No,
Councillor Watson-Felt,
Yes.
Councillor Varela,
No.
and I am a yes. So that passes 3-2. In addition to that, I would love to send something out of committee that says why this 8% increase was given. Does anyone want to make a motion on what that should be?
I would make a motion that the 8% increase or the new salary, however we're writing it, is reflective of an annual increase based on cost of living of 3% plus a 5% merit increase based on the city clerk's extremely well executed duties and her ability to increase her support of more complicated elections processes and requirements of tech enhancements under COVID in the last year and a half.
So I have, and just I try to get all of that. Just correct me if I have anything wrong here. This increase is given based on a 3% cost of living increase plus a 5% increase based on the clerk's ability to execute in complicated election processes and her ability to execute remotely during COVID. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that? Councillor Cohen.
thank you, Chair Hapworth. I would like to add in whatever is presented to the council that the vote was 3-2. And I can't speak for Councilor Varela, but I voted against this because I believe that there should have been some financial remedy that was not granted in this motion for what didn't happen last year.
And you can speak when that's under discussion. You can speak on that in the I mean, we'll discuss that it was a 3-2 vote, and you can speak under discussion in the council meeting.
Why can't it be included in the description?
The reason we gave the increase is based on your disagreement with the vote.
No, what I'm suggesting is the reason the vote was 3-2.
And we'll discuss that. That'll be under discussion. We'll discuss our thoughts around that, and anyone who disagrees can bring that forward. I'm not sure that needs to go forward in an official committee report. But you can make that, you can make that motion that should come out of committee if you like. Okay, so on Councillor Watson-Felt's motion of 3% increase, plus the increase was given based on a 3% cost of living increase plus a 5% increase based on the clerk's ability to execute and complicate election processes and her ability to execute remotely during COVID. Do we have a second on that? Councilor McLean, is that a second, or is that a question you had or a comment?
It was a comment. I would just like to add that that increase is also in gratitude for our clerk's many years of service to the city.
And did you want to second that motion, Councilor McLean?
I will second.
So we have a 3% cost of living increases plus a 5% increase based on the clerk's ability to execute and complicate election processes and her ability to execute remotely during COVID, and in gratitude based on our years of service to the city. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilor McLean?
Yes.
Councilor Cohen?
I'll vote present on this.
Councilor Watson-Felt?
Yes.
Councilor Varela?
Present.
And I'm a yes. And now I guess we'll leave it under Councilor Watson-Felt. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. I just have to say before we close this meeting out, or before further business, I would advocate for a different process in the future. I think that I would love to get to a better understanding transparently of, which I think is what Councilor Cohen is sort of at a little bit, which is, what does Madam City Clerk want? Who is having these conversations around fair compensation with her with regards to performance and merit and the comparison to other roles? And how do we do that in a public way that's where collaboration is public, but that we can have a fully informed conversation? Although I did find tonight's spreadsheets very helpful from both Madam City Clerk and Ms. Camerata. I think that, and I don't know what the solution is, but I do think there's got to be a better process.
I would agree. I think this is our first attempt at this. This is not ideal, but it's better than the city, than us not abiding by our own ordinances.
I would agree.
But yeah, Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. Not exactly my intent, but thank you, Councilor Watson-Felt. My intent was really that last year was a particularly difficult year, of course, for many city employees, but especially for the clerk's office. And I really feel like the things that we talked about in the beginning of this meeting, which is balancing the proper compensation and making sure that employees that we value are reasonably happy so they're not discouraged on their job, is important. And one reason I bring that up is because of what came up in the Public Health, Safety and Environment Committee meeting about the really poor condition of the clerk's offices. And, my belief that, any employee who is reasonably happy in their job is going to be more productive. And I very much, as we all say that we value what Eileen and the other people in the clerk's office do, my thing was that this was an opportunity for us not only to get the clerk's compensation to the right place, but maybe to provide a little bit of remedy for what happened last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cohen. I'll just, we, in the interest of just efficiency, we are not currently under discussion right now. I don't disagree with you. I just want to make sure we move this meeting along and we're not rehashing the last vote that just happened, because that vote's in the past, and we're on to the next item. Is there, Councilor Watson, do you have anything else you want to add quickly before we move on to the next item?
Well, I think I have a question of Councilor Cohen's. So, you know, when Councilor Cohen made a motion earlier to propose a 7.5% increase on base salary, he later amended it to add a sort of recompense cash amount that was not specified. Is there a number, Councilor Cohen, that you're considering we might take up as an additional motion for a cash addition to this tonight? Do you have a number in mind that you deem appropriate?
Councilor Cohen, and then we can move on to we can move forward.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Hapworth and Councilor Watson-Felt. The stipend that I included was $1,500.
Okay, so the next item is to decide 3 goals moving forward. Do we want to take that up tonight, or do we want to wait till another meeting? What is the will of the body? I'm happy to stay here as long as we need to. Keep moving. Okay, nobody's in opposition. Okay. So I think that, like I said, I think there was some general thoughts around the use of technology. I think there was some thoughts around just continued fair and accessible elections. And then my personal opinion is just, you know, we're not adding in a lot of crazy things here. We should just put the duties prescribed by city ordinance. That's my personal opinion. But I'll take a motion from somebody else if they. Councilor Watson-Felt.
I would be comfortable with that, Councilor Hapworth. It sounds like the tech conversation is already ongoing, which I would definitely support continue. And then beyond that, given this conversation tonight, I don't think that we can be asking much more of Madam City Clerk. In all fairness, I definitely think that obviously equitable and accessible elections is already well at the top of her list. And then I think the only other thing that came up tonight was, you know, further research on translation services as might be possible. But beyond that, I'm comfortable moving forward with duties as outlined in the ordinance.
Okay. So I have.
Counselor, I'm sorry, it looks like Madam City Clerk.
Oh, I'm sorry, Eileen.
I just want to add on that accessible elections. I'm all governed by state mass general law, of what I can and cannot do for elections. And not that we have always gone above and beyond, even when we weren't required to do Spanish. We did most of everything but our ballots in Spanish. So there are laws that I have to follow before I couldn't do things in Spanish, but I did as much as I could. So I'd be careful on what you would like for clear and open and transparent for the election process. And just to go back to Council McLean's a statement he made earlier, one of the first things that I did when I became city clerk was to reach out to the LLC group. I met with them quite often in the very beginning because of, not that I think it was warranted, but with the MOU and all that was going around prior to, being appointed. I met with them quite often during the 2020 elections. I did form a working group to not only with the Commission on Disabilities, but I included the LLC and I included VOCIS. And, so I have been, that has definitely been a goal of mine. With this new requirement of Spanish, I mean, I always have Spanish poll workers, but I need more. So I need to reach out to these groups again. Obviously with COVID, it's been difficult, but I need the community to step up and try to find more poll workers, but I have been open those lines of communication since 2018. I think they have gone much better. And just one quick historical note because of institutional knowledge, Councilor Masillo, what is old is new again, because prior to, probably like late 2000s or early 2000s, the councilors did keep track of their own agenda items and committee information. And then when things got a lot put on their plates, Debbie Birkinshaw is the one that put together the tracking forms and how everything was done. So it's just funny how, like, not reinventing the wheel, but just how things come around again in cycles. It was just a tidbit of information of history. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McLean?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say that I think that framing that Eileen offered just now is really important. A lot of what we're asking her to do is just to continue in the good work that she's already doing, right? So this work around digitizing records and making them available remotely, the work around, increasing access to city resources for our ESL populations, those are all things that our clerk has already invested in. Which is why we like our clerk. So it's more about just saying, I think, with the goal setting, yes, these are the priorities. They're in line. Like, continue to invest your energy in those things.
And I think it makes sense to add to that second portion here, work within her duties to ensure accurate and fair elections within state guidelines. And I think that, at least in my opinion, I think that the goal here is to stick with our ordinances and to set some sort of some very broad goals, not to say you need to do 3 hours of this every day or anything along those lines, but to just say, do what the ordinances tell us to do, and here's a couple other things that we'd love to see you focus on. Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. I'm in full agreement with Councilor McLean, and I want to reinforce what Eileen said. It was almost like the first day that she got the position that she reached out to the LLC, and I think she's done a really good job reaching out to marginalized communities in the city. I do feel like, when I suggested a goal of maybe having a educational show on SATV, it was just because a lot of people don't have the same kind of access that we think. It's not that the clerk hasn't done a great job in doing what she can within the parameters that she's afforded. It's that we can all, everyone on this call and everyone else, we can all do better at trying to create access for those who don't have it or believe they do.
Agreed. So Councilor Watson-Felt's motion was to, if I want to read this back real quick, to recommend goals set forth for the city clerk in FY23 include make use of current technology in order to streamline processes and procedures in the city clerk's office. Number 2, work within her duties to ensure accurate, fair, and accessible elections within state guidelines. And number 3, carry out all duties of the city clerk as prescribed by city ordinance. Do we have a second on that motion?
Councilor Hapworth, I'd like to amend the motion, please.
Yes.
I'd like it to read to continue to prioritize.
Is that on number 2?
At the beginning, you open the statement with those to continue, that she continue to prioritize the 3 things.
Okay.
Because I think Councilor McLean is exactly right. And that is the spirit of what I was saying, which was these conversations are ongoing, the work is happening, in addition to adding to your amendment as well, Chair Hapworth, which was to add within state guidelines, I believe is what you had added. It looks like Madam City Clerk would like to make a comment.
I would like to hopefully be able to add to my own goals, especially like with you, Councilor Watson-Felt, we need to talk about a permanent Ward 2 voting location before too long. And and I'm getting new voting equipment that have to be decided. And we have to change our census that was supposed to go out already because we had to add Spanish. So we're working on that. So I like to be able to add to those 3 goals as well.
Absolutely.
Are you asking to include that? To include that in the motion, or you mean?
Well, I just asking that when I do my budget that I'll add those in additional ones. And Council Cohen, I held voter education down at Espacio a couple of years ago in person for voters to come up. And I know like Lucy was there and Perla and a couple of people from the CDC. So not too many people from the outside came, but it was to explain their process. And I had my bilingual staff person there to translate for me as well. And I have like basic diagrams of what to do. So I just, again, I just wanted to point that out.
Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you for your patience, Chairperson Hapworth. I should the motion then read and additional goals as outlined by the city clerk? How do we want to capture that in a way that is efficient without forcing Eileen to list everything she wants to do tonight?
I mean, it's up to the body how we want to do that. It's certainly what these 3 goals that we set here are not gonna
All inclusive.
Are not Eileen's
No.
Bible moving forward, but they are us setting some very broad goals. But I'm if you want to amend it and say and all goals, additional goals set by the city clerk, that's fine.
Let's do that. Twice amended, back on the table.
So can you read how you'd want to see that written?
I would say close it with, in addition to annual goals outlined and set by the city clerk. Sound right? Anyone want to edit that?
And additional goals outlined and set by the city clerk.
I would say additional annual goals. We need to get that. This has got to be an annual process. She sets annual goals on her own. We need to be, if we're going to be in accordance with the ordinance, we're doing this annually.
We could all, just as a friendly amendment, we could also, and I'm happy to do it this way as well. We could also say, this is like at the beginning, we could say this is inclusive of all goals ongoing goals that the city clerk continues to set for her office. Would that be fair, or would you rather have that as its own bullet?
I'm fine with whatever everyone's comfortable with. So I would accept that unless there's major reservations.
I'll put that at the end here. This is inclusive. All right, so I have a motion that these goals set forth by the city clerk in FY23 include continue to make use of current technology in order to streamline processes and procedures in the city clerk's office, continue to work within her duties to ensure accurate, fair elections within state guidelines, continue to carry out all duties of the city clerk as prescribed by city ordinance. And as a note, this is inclusive of annual and ongoing goals outlined by this and set by the city clerk. And this was seconded by Councilor Varela, correct, Councilor?
Yep.
Okay, and we'll take a roll. Councilor McLean,
Yes.
Councilor Cohen,
Yep.
Councilor Watson-Felt,
Yes.
Councilor Varela,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That passes 4-0. I'm sorry, 5-0. And before we wrap up, I'll just add that I know we needed to get something out of this committee here today, and I think this was a thoughtful exercise to work through, the time we spent on just comparative salaries and how this all goes down, and then even through the disagreement about what that number should actually be. I will add that this is, you're free to continue to do research on this and to ask questions and to reach out. This is not, we have not set the city clerk's salary here tonight. We have made a recommendation out of committee based on a slight majority inside the committee. But you're free to continue to do this. You're free to amend this on the floor or make other motions when we get into the city council. So just wanted to add that out there that if you didn't feel like you had enough time to prepare or to ask the right questions before this, you can still do that over the next week. But great discussion. Really appreciate Lisa, the time that you spent, and Eileen, the time you spent while you were probably had other things you'd rather be doing in front of us. And again, I want to just reiterate, nobody else that I know of in the city of Salem has to have their salary discussed in a public meeting like this. So I appreciate everything you do for us, Eileen, just over the last year, and then appreciate your willingness to sit here with us as we work through this process. Hopefully this will improve going forward. I think this is a good step forward, but certainly open to changes as we move on into the future. And with that, I'll take another motion. Councilor Varela.
Motion to adjourn.
Councilor Varela motions to adjourn. Seconded by Councilor Watson-Felt. Councilor McLean.
Yes.
Councilor Cohen.
Of course.
Councilor Watson-Felt.
Yes.
And I am a yes. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. We'll see you guys.